Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story about a single event that literally plunged the world into chaos. It's a wild tale of climate shock, a global crisis, and incredible human resilience. And it was all kicked off by a volcano that, honestly, most of us have probably never even heard of. So picture this. What if summer just never showed up? I mean, it's the middle of July, you're expecting sunshine and heat, but instead there's frost on the ground. The sun, it's just this weird dim disk in the sky, and a strange fog just hangs in the air, while the rain, it just never seems to stop. Sounds like something out of a movie, right? Well, for millions of people, this was their terrifying reality just over 200 years ago. Yep, this isn't fiction. This was the grim reality for so many people back in 1816. The year was so bizarre, so cold, and so completely destructive that it earned a nickname that's, well, pretty chilling and has stuck ever since. All across Western Europe and even North America, people were completely baffled and, frankly, terrified. I mean, you had these bone-chillingly cold temperatures that just wouldn't quit, rain that was just relentless, widespread crop failures, and then there was this weird, mysterious dry fog that just seemed to dim the sun. This wasn't just a bit of bad weather, you know? This was a full-blown catastrophe leading to famine and massive social unrest. And the crazy part? Nobody had any idea what was causing it. The search for an explanation, well, that trail would eventually lead scientists literally to the other side of the globe, to an event that had happened a whole year before any of this chaos even started. So let's talk about the culprit behind this whole global disaster. A volcano you've probably never heard of, on an Indonesian island. Its name? Mount Tambora. Okay, so check this out. On April 10th, 1815, Tambora didn't just erupt, it exploded. We're talking about the most disastrous volcanic eruption in all of recorded history. The immediate blast was absolutely catastrophic. It killed more than 60,000 people on the islands nearby. But its deadliest impact was still on its way. A kind of silent, climatic time bomb had just been released into the atmosphere. So how does a volcano in Indonesia freeze the rest of the world? Well, it's pretty wild. Tambora basically shot a huge amount of sulfur dioxide, that's SO2, way up into the stratosphere. Once it was up there, it turned into these tiny particles called sulfate aerosols, forming this kind of persistent veil that wrapped around the entire planet. Think of it like a giant planetary sunshade reflecting sunlight back out into space. And with less sun getting through, well, global temperatures absolutely plummeted. All right, so a colder planet, what does that actually mean for people on the ground? Well, the domino effect of this climate shock was just devastating. It triggered what historians now call the last great subsistence crisis of the Western world. But here's the thing, the impact wasn't the same everywhere, not even close. If you look at Western and Central Europe, they got hit incredibly hard. We're talking temperatures dropping by 2 to 4 degrees Celsius, and in some places, they got twice as much rain. But then you look over at Eastern Europe and parts of Russia, and things were pretty much normal, maybe even a little warmer. So you've got this wild disparity that basically created a continent of haves and have-nots, which, as you can imagine, fueled a lot of tension and desperation. For the farmers stuck in those hard-hit areas, the results were just catastrophic. The rain never stopped, so their grain and potatoes literally rotted where they were stored. Get this. In France and Switzerland, it was so cold for so long that when they finally went to pick grapes in November, they were still hard and green. It was a complete and utter agricultural disaster. And that's why historians use such a serious name for it. This wasn't just, a bad harvest. This was the entire food supply system collapsing. It pushed millions of people right to the absolute brink of starvation. A crisis on a scale they hadn't seen in generations. And things only got worse the next year, as food supplies just vanished. The price of grain went through the roof all across Europe. Now, if you lived in an inland area like Switzerland or parts of Germany, you suffered the most. Port cities that could still import some food did a little better, but for millions of ordinary people, food became something they just couldn't afford. Now, all this suffering, it triggered two very powerful and really different human responses. On one hand, you had a desperate attempt to just escape the misery. And on the other, a surprising wave of compassion to help those who were suffering. So you see communities grappling with this disaster in completely opposite ways. For some people, the only answer they could see was to leave, emigration. But think about it. Crossing the Atlantic back then was incredibly expensive. It was an option for some people in Britain and Ireland, but not really for the folks in the hardest-hit inland regions. But then, on the flip side, this crisis also sparked these just incredible acts of kindness. And this right here is a perfect example. This simple note was attached to a little pouch of money left by a young girl in a town in Switzerland. And when her local pastor mentioned what she did in a sermon, it just ignited this massive wave of charity. Donations started pouring in, so much in fact that the pastor had to hire people just to help him distribute it all to the poor. Amazing, right? Okay, so this all happened 200 years ago. Why are we talking about it now? Why is this story about a volcano still so incredibly relevant today? Well, because an event like Tambora, it wasn't a one-off fluke. Scientists are very clear on this. These massive climate-altering super eruptions, they're rare for sure, but they are absolutely not impossible. So it's not really a question of if another one will happen, it's a question of when. When you look back, the whole crisis of 1816 is this remarkable and honestly pretty sobering case study. It's a powerful reminder of a few key things. 1, our planet's climate can change with terrifying speed. 2, our food and economic systems are way more fragile than we think. 3, the impacts of these shocks are never, ever spread out evenly. And 4, in the face of a true crisis, you see the full range of human responses, from utter desperation to incredible compassion. And all of this history really leaves us with one final and, I think, pretty provocative question. 2 centuries later, living in a world that is so reliant on complex global supply chains and hyper-efficient agriculture, just how prepared are we for the next Tambora?